Hey there friends, remember a couple days ago I put out a video that talked about this public information officer pretty much disparaging all concealed carry holders because one guy allegedly pulled out a gun, brandished, did not shoot during a road rage type incident. The post by this idiot has since been deleted, but the point of the video was to show you that law enforcement pretends in many cases, in almost all cases, to be the true experts in firearms, when in reality they're not. Before I go on, guys, please check with my friends Attorneys on Retainer. Attorneys on Retainer, you're going to see in this video, probably can keep you out of jail. They are very different from the types of, quote, insurance, carry insurance, that you might experience with other companies. Obviously, you've seen some bad press from some of these other companies. Attorneys on Retainer is actually having attorneys who are at your beck and call. In other words, you don't have a group of people on the other end of the phone who are going to determine if you're guilty or not based on what the phone call conversation is. That's where a lot of these insurance companies are. They determine if they're going to cover you. Attorneys on Retainer is going to cover you. Don't forget to use my code FTATF when you go to Attorneys on Retainer. You'll get 50% off that $100 sign-up fee. Again, FTATF will save you $50 at sign-up. Yeah, police are more skilled and proficient with firearms than pretty much anybody who carries on a daily basis, right? Not so fast, my friend.
We do have some breaking news here on First at 4. The Breaux Bridge police chief ends up hospitalized after accidentally shooting himself. Authorities confirming Chief Albert LeBlanc suffering a gunshot wound to the leg earlier today. It happened as he was participating in training exercises in St. Martinville. That training event taking place at the gun range operated by the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office. Officials tell us LeBlanc accidentally shot himself and the injuries weren't life-threatening. He was treated at a local hospital and has since been released.
So this police chief is probably qualifying, if you want to call it that. This is an unelected person who is going to get passed by whoever the firearms instructor is, whoever is handling or taking care of this case. In fact, this guy literally shot himself during his training and probably qualification. That's probably the only reason why he was there. Why else would he be there? This guy probably doesn't carry a gun ever. And the little bit of time that he does go, or pulls the trigger, he's going to qualify. My guess is he probably got a passing grade. I'm looking into this because I just want to know this. But my guess is if he's qualifying, even though he shot himself in the leg and went to the hospital, probably got a passing grade. Good old police chief, right? Good old Louisiana politics. That's where I'm at, so I'm not dogging the state of Louisiana. I'm born and raised here and currently still live here. My point is, these are the experts. Anytime there is any kind of gun legislation that's being proposed, anti-gun legislation, at the state level, federal level, wherever, these are the experts they call. These are the ones that are out there giving the argument and the story that only they are qualified to carry guns, that we need additional training if we're going to carry. We need all this other stuff. Because, by God, they're the guys that do this for a living, and they're the true experts, and they can identify us as being the unsafe ones. You hear about these types of incidents, not always with a police chief. This is pretty sad for Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. But you hear about these instances where they're shooting themselves all the time. I remember a story back in around 2000 of a guy, I believe, in South Carolina, who was an off-duty, he was working, I believe, at a strip club as security, but he was a law enforcement guy. And he was in the bathroom drawing in the mirror, like the Wild West, and sent around through the mirror in this place of business. These are not the only instances we hear of. We hear of this often. Again, these are the guys who are on speed dial of all these anti-gun politicians whenever they want to bring somebody into committee and talk about how we shouldn't be carrying guns or that we need additional training because, again, they're the experts, not us, and they know their safe way around the firearm. I have to ask this question. What if this were to happen to you and I? In other words, what if we were at a gun range, not necessarily the sheriff's gun range like this police chief was in this case, But what if we were at just a normal gun range and we shot ourselves in the leg? We would probably be ostracized. We would be talked about. We'd probably have people like this police chief come out and talk about how we're not qualified to handle guns safely because we need the type of training that law enforcement has, like this police chief has received. We are held to a different standard. And by God, we rightfully hold ourselves to a different standard. But we internally not only put that pressure on ourselves, but these other people hold us to a different standard altogether than what law enforcement. When an acorn falls out of a tree and hits a car, and I mag dump into a car and I can't see if there really was a threat, what do you think would happen to me? Do you think that they would just say, guy thought it was a gun going off, no foul, no problem? No, they would put me in jail. And they would say, this is why these people shouldn't be carrying guns. Because look how unsafe he was. Have you heard anything about that law enforcement officer that popped off because an acorn hit the top of his car? No perceived threat anywhere other than a squirrel dropping a freaking acorn out of an oak tree? Now, I brought up the attorneys on retainer because this cop here, police chief, who shot himself, no big deal. What if, going back to my question, I was at a gun range in a state like Virginia, because remember Mr. Alan Coley, who was covered by USCCA at the time and ended up not getting represented by them in court. Remember that? When he shot the YouTube prankster? This guy got off on the malicious shooting of this YouTube prankster, but still had the charge of shooting a gun in a public place filed against him, and that charge stuck. What if you and I were in Virginia, not law enforcement, and shot ourselves in the leg just like this police chief did? For one, I would want to know that I had attorneys on retainer covering me, because Virginia doesn't seem like the place I want this to happen in, based on what happened to Mr. Alan Coley. The court system did not seem very okay with it. Even though they let him off of the main charge, they felt like they needed to charge him with something, like something needed to stick, right? Oh, we can't let him off completely. So I don't trust that court system in Virginia. So if this were to happen in Virginia, what would have happened? Law enforcement gets off. Nothing happens. Oh, it was an accident. It was just an accident. I mean, this guy was a professional, right? He's a police chief. He's an expert. He's a gun expert. Something bad must have happened, because if a police chief is shooting himself in the leg, I mean, it couldn't have been negligence, right? Something bad happened. Maybe it was the SIG P320, right? And it just went off. But if it was me or you, something else would have happened. And that's the problem I have. Classism, double standards, things like that. In many cases, you argue all you want. I had one guy, excuse me, in all capital letters in my comment section when I had that comment about the public information officer chastising other concealed carry holders. Don't come at me with that. There are plenty of good, well-trained law enforcement officers out there that know their way around a firearm. There are police chiefs, just like this guy, who shoot themselves in the leg. I'm sure there's other people who have shot themselves in the leg too. Just because a guy shoots himself in the leg, say a person at an academy, a trainee, or just anybody, it's probably not going to be headline news. This guy was a police chief. Kind of hard to bury this, right? There's likely instances like this that happen often enough. I'm not going to say all the time, because they probably don't. I would like to think not. I know trainers with law enforcement. I know one of the longtime trainers here with the Lake Charles Police Department. Guy was not only super proficient with firearms and safe, but one hell of a shot. There's some really good guys out there in law enforcement that deal with firearms. Our sheriff's department has an excellent guy training new cadets and academy guys. Whenever the true experts are needed and these people make phone calls, we get police chiefs, we get captains. We don't get the real experts. When is the last time you saw an actual expert called to testify on a committee, and it was the guy who's in charge of training at an academy. Very rarely, I've never ever seen it. It's always the highest ranking guy there and usually the least proficient with a firearm. My point in all this is I don't like double standards, and I don't like when the group of people being exalted to be the true experts are in fact some of the least proficient and most dangerous with a firearm, yet they continuously get viewed as the expert and they crap on those of us who know our way around a firearm much better. And I would take most of you to have my back with a firearm, especially instead of this police chief who might shoot me or himself in the leg.